There are many scientists in the history who have played a vital role in many fields. One of the famously known mathematician, computer scientist, philosopher, and theoretical biologist is Alan Turing. He is famous for a number of breakthroughs which altered the course of the 20th century. In 1936, he published a paper which laid the foundation of computer science, providing the first formal concept of computer algorithm. He also played a major role in the Second World War by designing the machines which cracked the German military codes. And in the late 1940s, he turned his attention to artificial intelligence and proposed a model that is known as Turing test, which is still very important in information and communication technology. His contribution to mathematical biology is less famous, but it triggered a whole new field of mathematical inquiry into pattern formation. He discovered that a system with just two molecules could at least create a spot or strip patterns if they diffused and chemically interacted just in the right way. This theory has come to be accepted as an explanation of fairly simple patterns such as zebra strips and even the ridges on the sand dunes. Many of his theories were resisted for decades, but now the ecologists have confirmed his theories. Well, stay tuned to Gateway to Knowledge to know how the ecologists have confirmed Alan Turing's theories for the Australian fairy circles. Now you may be wondering that what are these Australian fairy circles? These fairy circles are circular patches of the land barren of plants that varies between 2 and 15 meters in diameter, often encircled by a ring of stimulated growth of grass. And now the researchers have collected detailed data to show how the Alan Turing's model explains the striking vegetation patterns of the Australian fairy circles. To collect the data, the researchers used drone technology, spatial statistics, quadrant-based field mapping, and continuous data recording from a field weather station. With the drone and a multispectral camera, the researchers mapped the vitality status of the triodia grasses in 5 1-hectare plots and classified them into high and low vitality. The systematic and detailed fieldwork enabled for the first time in such an ecosystem a comprehensive test of the Turing pattern theory. Turing's concept was that in certain systems, due to random disturbances and a reaction diffusion mechanism, interaction between just two diffusible substances was enough to allow strongly patterned structure to spontaneously emerge. Physicists have used this model to explain the striking skin patterns in the zebrafish or leopards, for instance. Earlier modeling had suggested this theory might apply to these intriguing vegetation patterns, and now there is robust data from multiple scales which confirm that the Alan Turing's model applies to the Australian fairy circles. The data show that the unique gap pattern of the Australian fairy circle, which occur only in a small area of the town of Newman, emerges from the eco-hydrological biomass water feedbacks from the grasses. In fact, the fairy circles form clay crust from weathering and resistant water runoff. The clumps of grasses increase shading and water infiltration around the nearby roots. With the increasing years after fire, they merged more and more at the periphery of the vegetation gaps to form a barrier so that they could maximize their water uptake from the fairy circle's runoff. The protective plant cover of grasses could reduce the soil surface temperature by about 25 degrees Celsius at the hottest time of the day, which facilitates the germination and growth of new grasses. To sum it up, the scientists found evidence both at the scale of the landscape and at much smaller scales that the grasses with their cooperative growth dynamic redistribute the water resources and modulate the physical environment, and thus they function as an ecosystem engineers to modify their own environment and better cope with the arid conditions. And the most fascinating thing is that the grasses are actively engineering their own environment by forming symmetrically spaced gap patterns. The vegetation benefits from the additional run of water provided by the large fairy circles, also helps to keep the arid ecosystem functional even in very harsh dry conditions. Without the self-organization of the grasses, this area would likely become desert, dominated by barren soil. So now the ecologists have provided an empirical study to extend this principle from physics to dry land ecosystem with fairy circles. So that was all about fairy circles, and now the mysterious fairy circles riddle is finally solved. To know more about such interesting information, do like and subscribe to my channel. Until next time, stay healthy, stay shiny.